3, 2, 1, live. Anthony Darby.
Chuck Henn.
Episode 3 of the Peninsula Podcast. We're still going to keep it named that until we come up with a better name. For those folks that were disappointed that we weren't talking about weed last week, please don't be in despair. This episode is all about cannabis and marijuana. Last week we took first, so just a recap. Episode 1, we kind of dove into Maryland's laws. It was pretty much Maryland specific. A lot about cannabis. Episode 2, we did a 10,000 overview of hemp and kind of the world, and then also more domestically, and then state of Maryland. And then this week, we will go into all things cannabis in the United States. So I'm going to dive into medical programs, rec programs, decriminalization laws. We'll go into the variances, everything from consumption bars in Vegas and Alaska to programs in Colorado, Washington. Medical programs that are successful, like Maryland. We'll dive into programs that struggle. Delaware, New Jersey, New York come to mind. And then obviously dive into what Maryland may look like if it were to go legalized. And I think that will probably be the end of our time.
This is a pretty broad topic since there's a lot to go through with all of them. So we'll try our best to break them all down as we always do. And it should be some really good information.
Both got collared shirts on today. We brought our fancy stuff. Woo. I think these topics, although they're broad, they're going to allow us to go down a few wormholes throughout them. So I think that's what will be enjoyable. So I think on its face, it seems like fairly obvious when I say the difference between a medical program or a adult use program. But there's some nuances that people don't really typically pick up on. I think the first one that I would argue, the biggest difference between an adult use program, or several differences, one is going to be your access. So when you have a full adult use program, you're going to be able to walk in with a certain age restriction, likely over 21, and be able to purchase marijuana or cannabis without needing any type of physician recommendation or a prescription, whatever they call it in that particular state. Think of it as an access issue. So you basically have access as an adult to be able to go in to purchase marijuana or cannabis. Typically in all medical states, there's going to be a prescription or some sort of a written recommendation, a mechanism in which a physician empowers you to obtain cannabis. Outside of the access issue, then what I was getting ready to say was I would argue the next biggest difference is going to be the taxability. So you're typically not going to see medical programs garnering lots and lots of tax revenue for their states. It's not typically something that's very politically popular to go out and heavily tax a medicine. However, you find the complete opposite when you look at the legalization and adult use programs. When we see taxes 25, 30%.
We'll get into like when we start talking about it, some of these states, like Washington State, for instance, is 37% sales tax.
Woo!
On all cannabis. So we can get into how much the state of Washington collected in tax revenue last year too.
So there are these nuances, and every state's going to do it a little differently. If they have dual programs where they have adult use and rec.
Yeah, and I would just say, and there is a distinction when you look at the programs. A lot of the political cloud around the legalization of recreational marijuana comes from the taxes, because they can fix a lot of things for the states. We'll get in, like we said, we'll get into how much revenue the states collect, but all states are in desperate need of better education systems. It's something we hear kind of all the time. It's something that rings true to our hearts. There's deficits, there's unfunded pension liabilities, there's all kinds of things that they see this shining light of recreational cannabis tax can kind of fix. And on the medical side, it really is treated as a medicine. When people come in our doors, that's why they're there.
And the variances of these are going to be everything from what types of products are available in each state. So, in Maryland, we didn't have edibles. We now see that bill passed, and edibles are very shortly on their way here in Maryland. Some states don't have flower. Some states don't allow high THC concentrates. So all these different characteristics, when you're looking at individualized state program, are really reason why we see so much variance state by state and little continuity, because it's tough for a company to compete using basically a streamlined single strategy across the nation with every state having significantly different programs. It would never work. So that being said, let's go into some of the most extreme circumstances or some of the most mature of the legalized states. And let's go through, before we get into that, real quick verbiage. So it was recreational marijuana. It was recreational.
It was recreational is where it started.
But people weren't necessarily just using it for recreation, right? It was more about a full access use. So then we saw adult use. But then we didn't like the fact that they were called users. So then we got rid of adult use, and the most PC term that I've heard to date are adult consumption markets. So when we look at these adult consumption markets,
rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, it goes right off the tongue, like endocannabinoid system. Right. Adult use markets like Vegas, Alaska. There's 12 total, correct?
I think there's 10 in DC.
10
technically.
in DC. 10 in DC
so
total.
11.
There's 33 medical states that have some sort of a medical program, to give you guys some understanding of numbers. Someone like so Vegas went through a similar maturation process that a lot of states do. Nevada had a fairly robust medical program with a lot of gray areas. There was kind of this gray market around delivery and some other things. And I think that they saw the best way to do two things. One is to better police the program, but more than anything, I believe they saw the tax dollars could come from having recreational dispensaries in Vegas. And they saw all these people that were illegally bringing all their weed and vape pens to Vegas, and they weren't making any money off of it. So we see a little over, it was almost right around the same time that we opened up. Mm-hmm. We saw Vegas go rec. So they've probably been about a year and a half of operation now. And then most recently, we saw them follow the same foots as Alaska and actually go with adult consumption bill. So an adult consumption bill actually sets up the precedent of almost similar to what you'd find at a bar that serves alcohol, except it's going to be cannabis. You'd be able to consume cannabis with your peers and friends. You would be able to go there and purchase cannabis. It would be the closest thing to mimic a bar or restaurant than we've ever seen in the United States.
Yeah, and I think, and the fact that it's in the state of Nevada and Vegas, who has this notorious history with all these vices, and that's why people go there. I think, when these states go recreational, much like they do medical, the programs are going to reflect the values of the state, right? And kind of what the state's all about. So in places like Vegas, where, they're known for sex, drugs, and rock and roll and gambling, right? Like, it's nothing for them to throw a cannabis bar in the middle of town, where a state, in the South or maybe in the Northeast that's liberal but a little bit more conservative, I think they'll take a different approach, and we've kind of seen that play out. And that's just my kind of opinion of how it's going to work.
And so far, it's been incredibly successful. So we've seen the dispensaries there have tons of volume. We haven't heard any outcries of the city coming to a screeching halt because now all of a sudden cannabis is around, and they're very clean and pristine city of Las Vegas, Nevada. And it's and the pricing is interesting as well. So I had a friend of mine on Facebook went and was at a business conference. It's also great because there's so many business conferences in Vegas. So you're getting all these business guys that are flying out there, and they haven't been around the ability to without having to break a law, be able to walk into a building and purchase weed. There's so many of these guys that are coming out of retirement, 20-year plus, enterprise, middle management, seasoned veterans. And it's hilarious. And you look at the pricing, and 27% Banana Kush was $55 for an eighth. So even though it's out west, even though it's in more mature markets and stuff, we don't necessarily see some of the immediate changes in pricing that we see like in California and Washington State.
In Oregon.
So when you go through and you looked at some of those taxes that were generated from Washington, what were the
So let's
findings?
let's look at the rates real quick of these states that have a recreational program, and then we can look at the taxes that they collected from them. I'm not going to go through every single one, but just so people get an idea, each state's completely different. In California, there's 2 levels of taxes. There is a tax that the cultivators pay, which is $9.25 an ounce, and they pay that tax. And then there's also a sales tax, or an excise tax as they call it. It's not really a sales tax, of 15% on the final sale of cannabis. Much like California, Colorado has a 15% excise tax from the cultivator to the retailer, and then another 15% sales tax at the final kind of outlet. So there's 30% taxes levied in the system somewhere. And then you get down to something like Nevada, who has a rate of 15%, as determined by the fair market value determined by the Nevada Department of Taxation. So if they don't like their revenues, they'll surely change them. And then in 2017, they also created a new 10% sales tax paid by consumers. So it's really 25%. And what people don't realize is that the taxes are there. They just don't see them at the register all the time. They've been collected throughout the process, and then also levied on the final sale. And then we'll get down to the last two, my favorite, because I think these are both kind of states that Darby and I view as, not have done the best job, between Washington and Oregon. I mean, you look at the prices there. There's companies going out of business all the time. The market's flooded with all kinds of stuff. Oregon, it doesn't have a general sales tax in the state, but it levies a 17% sales tax on the sale of marijuana. And Washington levies a 37% sales tax on the sale of recreational marijuana. So when you look at the revenues collected from that, the state of Washington, and these are kind of estimated for 2018, and this is done by Forbes, so obviously I'll trust their estimating. The state of Washington should have collected $319 million in revenue last year just through the tax on recreational marijuana.
Do you know what they estimated?
What's that?
Do you know
I don't know what the state estimated at first.
Sometimes we hear, sometimes the naysayers will say, oh, well, we see California estimated X, Y, Z, and they didn't get anywhere near that. But first off, California does a lot of poor estimating. I've seen them miss the ball on a lot of things, not just marijuana.
Yeah.
And we also look at that state as probably one of the, it's almost like the poster boy for how to not regulate cannabis. They did a really poor job from the beginning. At one point in time, I was listening to a data scientist from New Frontier say, I know how many dispensaries are in California operating right now. California does not. The idea that the state was unable to police their own program is crazy. And I think that when folks try to say, well, you can't look at cannabis as a good source of revenue generation, or you can't trust the expectations because California expected this and they only got that. I think that might be an outlier and a poor example. I think when you look at Alaska, who I believe has done fairly well with the revenue from taxation of marijuana and cannabis. You look at Colorado, who's funded pre-K and done some pretty cool initiatives based upon their cannabis revenues. That there is this path of utilizing this taxation and high taxing of cannabis to fund things in the community. And I spoke today on an education panel, and my whole thing was it's a risk reward. If the community is going to risk what may happen when you have an adult use program, then they should get the rewards of the tax dollars. And that's kind of how I believe there's this pro quo way of making this work. And it's just something that we'll see continue forward as more states look at this as a taxable option. We'll see, how it comes from. And not every states do great on casino revenue, but Maryland seems to do better. And for myself, one of the things that I would argue, without getting too much into Maryland specifically, but just you have all these neighbors around you for any state. You look at someone like Kansas, who's got Colorado with all this revenue coming in, and Kansas is spending all this money trying to keep the pot out. It seems like they're spending good money on bad money, and it's not an economically feasible thing. And I know that Kansas isn't one of these states that's just, not without economic disparity. So, I think the other states will start looking at taxing this as a commodity, and realizing that, maybe 35% or 40% is a little high, but to get 20% or 25% is not unreasonable, and the market can bear that if it's done properly.
Yeah, just I'll run through some of the numbers for the other states real quick, just so everybody can get an idea. But California, when you look at these numbers, you also got to think of, it's not just, oh, well, they collected this amount of money and they collected this amount of money. You got to think about California's a state that people from around the world travel to. It's the most populous state in the country. They collected $300 million last year. So almost as much as Washington, but probably 5 times the amount of the population and 100 times the amount of visitors that go there. Colorado, $266 million, which is the most mature market of all of them. And then Oregon, $94.4 million. I think Oregon's program just has so many problems, and the way they've regulated kind of, I think that Darby spoke to earlier.
A third of what the other states
the other states did, and they're all on that same timeline and trajectory. But Oregon's done such a bad job at the program that, like, I mean, the sales revenue's not there because there's so much supply in the market that everything's so cheap, so you can't collect a lot of dollars on something that's so cheap. And then you have every single state around Oregon that has the same program, so it's just a weird situation. And then Nevada, $69.8 million. Alaska, $11 million. Massachusetts, $5.2 million, and that wasn't for the full year. I think
so that had to be for a partial.
Yeah,
right?
just for the part year. I don't know exactly how it was. And then you have 3 other states and 1 district of Columbia who have essentially legalized to a degree, but the programs aren't necessarily operational yet.
I mean, DC is a great example of a super dysfunctional program that could be overly robust and amazing, but
we talk about how you can purchase medical or recreational weed in DC. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's funny, like if people don't know, so like DC, it's a District of Columbia, right? It's not a state. There are certain things that they can and cannot do. It's a complete cluster. So the people of the District of Columbia voted to legalize recreational cannabis, but the government, I believe, right?
Andy Harrison and the team made sure that this initiative was not funded.
Yep.
So basically, yes, you can do it, but we're not giving you any dollars to actually get this thing off the ground.
But so you can do it, and the funny thing is you have to buy something else, right? There's pop-ups all over the streets of DC. I worked in DC for years, and I used to see them. I mean, it's open. People talk about it.
Show up to the nightclub at 9 o'clock, and it's like it's a glorified farmer's market / baked goods sale. And they'll sell you a sticker for $1, and for that $1 sticker, oh, by the way, you get an eighth of weed.
So yeah, $60 sticker, right?
Yeah.
So say a sticker for $60.
Sorry, $60 sticker.
A $60 sticker, a $100 shirt, and then with that purchase, you also get, because you can gift it. That's like the weird thing, is that you're able to like gift something. It's some weird laws, and I'm not the most well versed in them, but technically they can get away with it, and it happens every day. I know people who do it. I've seen it happen. I've seen the pop-ups on the streets. It's a weird thing.
And because of that market, their medical program has suffered. I mean, we know some of the operators of their medical program, and they've never truly gotten a full set of steam because there's this gray / it's not even necessarily a black market, but it's a gray market, and it's troublesome because I think the one thing that I've realized, and without sounding like the suit and tie guy in the weed job, is that there are a million reasons why, as a consumer, you'd want a highly regulated cannabis industry. Yeah. That you don't want some guy making shatter in his freaking garage. That you don't want dudes growing, even just growing, cultivating with their left to their own devices. Because when they get mold, they're using harmful stuff to remediate it. They're not just going to say, oh well, I'm just going to throw out these 13 pounds of thousands of dollars of profit that I planned on making these last 3 months. You know, we've seen in California specifically, heavy metals in vape cartridges, pesticides, just tons of nasty junk and crap in this fairly clean natural plant. And unfortunately, I know everybody wants homegrown and everybody wants it to be free and no one wants to pay anything, but there are truly a ton of benefits, especially for someone that's using this as a medicine, to make sure that you're in a highly regulated market. And although Maryland has got its struggles with the regulations, I think more and more often we speak endearingly of our regulations than we speak in terms of how they really impair us from doing our jobs. Because when I look at other states, and I know that they tell these folks, hey, everything's lab tested and this is super safe, and then the patients come to find out the news article stated actually nothing is safe, and it creates all this consumer confidence issues. And I don't think we really run into that a lot in Maryland. So that piece of it, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, that goes hand in hand with like just talking about how different states regulate, which I guess
kind of leads into the next. So when you get out of those the really wild west or really open market states like the Colorados of the world, and Vegas, then you start getting into more like license specific and more restrictive states that basically have the most robust medical program. So I would lump Maryland, Massachusetts before they went rec. Really, it's a lot of the states that I'm speaking of within the last 24 months have now gone rec. I mean, Nevada, Arizona, When we were doing our research, we didn't feel like when we were writing our application, we didn't really feel like we could necessarily use Colorado or California as the bar because they were much more mature markets. So we were looking at earlier markets, and I believe that we pulled from
Arizona was a good model for where Maryland is. And if you look at it, it's kind of eerie how the two programs have kind of moved hand in hand with each other.
So real quick, for those keeping track at home, we'll go through some of the things that we think are kind of requirements for a medical program to be successful. First is the specificity of cannabis products. We have seen almost all the programs that don't allow for flower. They are substantially less active. They're substantially less endorsed by patients. Patients still in our dispensary are purchasing about 50% flower. At one point, it was close to 75. It has gone down with the addition of vape pens and concentrates and tablets and tinctures and patches and all the other modalities that folks have to use, but still have a very, very strong flower base in our dispensary, and that exists in the nation. And these states that don't allow for flower, like we're seeing Virginia's getting ready to come on board, there's no flower allowed there. Or if it is, it's capped at a fairly low.
I don't think Virginia has flower.
I think it's all oils.
Yeah, it's all oils. So not only not flower, but I don't think they're allowed to have any of the other things that we have.
I think they'll use those oils in vape cartridges and figure some of the stuff out. But they're going to struggle. When we talked to one of the processors who's actually got a license in Virginia, they were telling us that I know for a fact THC is capped, right? But THCA is not. So when you look at live res products, they have THCA, not THC. And until that person goes home and activates it. So these lawmakers are going to continue to try to get savvy in terms of how they're going to try to arbitrarily cap these things. But the market is going to be very strategic to what the patients and what the population wants. And they don't necessarily want all low THC products. And if you say THC and someone says, "Well, you didn't say THCA," they're gonna push that envelope.
Yeah, so there's a good chance that if they don't have the A behind it, it holds up.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the difference between shall and may.
Yeah.
So
we're seasoned attorneys at this point.
We
Just kidding. Don't ask me any questions about being a lawyer.
If you're a realtor, listening to this, no, we're not. Yeah. But if you're Joe Smo of my poli-sci background at Salisbury University and what I've learned over the last 5 years, I'd be willing to take this to the next step. So anyway, back to what makes a program qualified and good. You got to have flower. You want to have limited verbiage and restrictions around THC content. You know, we saw Maryland not have edibles, and although patients griped, it did not hinder the program. It didn't hinder the growth. And in full validation of what I just said, Maryland said no edibles, and all of a sudden one of the delivery drivers shows up to my store with what I thought was a gummy, and quickly learned of the word troche, which is a soft lozenger, not a gummy. And all of a sudden, PH has got glorified gummies. So now 3 other vendors are making the exact similar product.
And then Larry Hogan, the governor of the great state of Maryland, signed into effect yesterday an edibles bill for the state of Maryland. So now the program will have edibles, and they're working to coming up with how they're going to regulate that right now. So stay tuned. It'll be an interesting ride.
You can imagine the level of scrutiny on a food and beverage product alone, and then with this federally illegal DEA-regulated substance. I can't wait to see who's scratching their head, Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene right now. But we will see that roll out. So it doesn't always have to include everything. It doesn't always have to have edibles. It doesn't always have to have everything. But for a program to be successful, it's got to have flower. You got to have vape cartridges, and you got to have concentrates that are going to have the higher THC content, because that's what people want. And truthfully, that gives them the incentive to stop buying on the street. If you have someone who buys flower and all of a sudden you open a dispensary with expensive oil that they can't relate to, they don't really have an aspiration of purchasing, they're not going to jump through all those hurdles when they can just go to their buddies who they've been getting flower, pot, cannabis, weed from for 10 years. There's no incentive there. Maryland got to a point when we first opened where our flower was much higher than what the street was. And it was a huge barrier of entry to a lot of folks. And when you look at it now, we're doing $7 grams, and all of a sudden someone says, okay, I can get a lab-tested product, high quality, at equal rate, or sometimes even cheaper than what I was paying on the street. Now I have this incentive to join a medical program. Remember, the medical program is going to require some level of hurdles for a patient, going to a doctor, getting a card. You know, if they spend $300 on a process before they even get into our door, many of them are going to say, well, that's an ounce that I could have instead of just joining a little program. So there has to be these incentives for these medical programs to do well. A full variety of products is going to be one of them. The next is going to be qualifying conditions. You got to make it easy for folks to go and have a productive conversation with the healthcare provider. Depending on states, I mean, some states are physicians, some states are nurse practitioners, some states are physician's assistants. We see the different chiropractors, midwives, dentists. So every state's going to have different criteria for folks that are able to basically write these recommendations, but you need to have a system in place so that a patient doesn't feel like they're going to get shot down or that there's not going to be a chance for them to obtain this recommendation. Maryland, for us, has been fairly good in terms of, at least in the Eastern Shore, we have many practitioners. Most of them are open-minded. We find that our patients are more and more likely to have sustainable conversations and being open and honest with these folks, as opposed to the conversations they were having with their primary care providers, 5 or 10 years ago, when they're saying, "Oh, do you use any illegal drugs?" And say, "Oh, absolutely not." And they go home and take a bong hit before they go to sleep, because that's the only thing that helps them sleep at night. So qualifying conditions, in Maryland, I think we have 12 or 13.
Yeah, I can't remember how many it is exactly. And they just added some too.
And then the one biggest outlier is going to be, Maryland has a condition that if a physician has a reasonable expectation that medical cannabis can give a health benefit that traditional pharmaceuticals or traditional medicine is not, then a healthcare provider can extend almost an off-label style recommendation to that patient. Off-label is typically what they see in the medicine and prescription world, where if let's say it's a medication for high blood pressure, but it also has a calming effect, you might see a doctor off-label write that prescription for anxiety, even though the FDA testing and everything behind that drug is supportive more around lowering blood pressure. Same thing in Maryland. If there's this reasonable expectation, even though it's not on the list, this doctor can then write and recommend medical cannabis for patients based upon their ability to have that health impact. The next thing is going to be, once you have your qualifying conditions, you have all the different modalities, is the limits. Maryland has very robust limits. We're 120 grams of flower.
When you talk about limits, it's just talking about how much an individual is allowed to purchase in a given period of time. In Maryland, it's a month. Other states may be different, but most of them impose a limit.
Yep. We've seen different, but what you're looking for is a program that's not going to be overly restrictive, so that if you have someone that is a heavy cannabis user, they're not incentivized to say, okay, well, I can only buy my 1 ounce a month here at the dispensary, but I go through 2 ounces, so I'm buying 1 ounce on the street and 1 ounce in the dispensary. You need to make it so that your limits are robust enough that there's a reasonable expectation that almost all patients can be served without being turned away because they met their max allotment for the month or week or bi-week, whatever, however it's regulated. Just to put it in perspective, I mean, that's almost 4 ounces or an ounce a week for Maryland. There is even an exception that patients can apply for an exemption to go over that amount. I would say that's less than 2 or 3% of our patient population. But there are folks that are, I know for one is a Crohn's patient who's typically cooking with his medical cannabis. So he goes through a whole lot of cannabis, but because basically of his need and his tolerance that's built up from years and years of using high levels of cannabis, it's not truly out of the standard deviation for protocol when you look at how he's medicating. So he just needed to get that exemption. But his case is definitely out of the norm for him. So these states that don't have flower, that don't have wide limits, that vertical integration. We see that states that require a vertical integration typically have fairly trivial, and these programs struggle to get off the ground. There's a lot of reasons behind it. So when I say vertically integrated programs, for instance, Delaware requires that the dispensary that sells the product processes that product and grows that product. They cannot do intercompany transfers. They have to be basically self-fulfilling. When you look at our dispensary, and one of our secret sauces is the fact that we have such a robust variety of products. We typically have over 40 strains of flower. We typically have 30 to 50 types of vape carts. We have over 150 SKUs in our dispensary. If we were tasked with making and processing all 150 of those SKUs ourselves, it would be more like 20 to 30. And I mean, that's what we see. Even these vertically integrated companies like Curio and Grassroots, I mean, these guys all have dispensaries, and there's not a single dispensary in Maryland that only sells their product.
Yeah.
I mean, Curio has to work with Rhythm and GTI. They have to work with Harvest and all these other Veranos and the other companies out there to be able to really provide that full product selection that makes them competitive. Folks in Delaware, this is a plant. This is something that has very little predictability in some ways of planning. And, if there's a run on the indica flower that you didn't predict, and all of a sudden you're out of indica and you don't have anybody to call and buy it from, then you're out of indica for weeks.
Yeah. Months.
In some cases. So, we see in New York, it's a vertically integrated program, and it struggles. I'm not sure I don't know if New Jersey is or not. Sure. I don't know, but one of the reasons why New Jersey struggles is because their qualifying conditions list and their limited number of dispensaries. We saw what seemed like almost a full legalization program was gaining tons of traction in New Jersey. I read an article yesterday. The reason why it was tabled because it was going to lose by one vote. That's all it takes, right?
That's all it takes.
And then once it loses once, then it can be considered a losing effort, and everything's politics. So it's better to table something than have it lose in a vote. But if I'm a patient in New Jersey, I'm still sitting here with my hands in the air saying, what the hell? Because I was probably excited the fact that you were going to take away the bureaucracy of my marginal medical program, and I was at least going to get an adult use program where at a minimum my access was going to increase. And it's almost like you guys went for the home run and you missed, but now the patients still have this shitty medical program in New Jersey. Like there was no benefit. I'm not sure that the medical program really got any better, and the patients are still struggling there. So those patients that are in New Jersey, in a place where you have high populations and high traffic and illegal drugs are not overly difficult to ascertain, like I would assume that if I was a New Jersey resident right now, I can tell you that if I was a Delaware resident right now, I would be very likely to be a street purchaser of my cannabis. It's highly unlikely that I would deal with the problems and the pain that Delaware patients deal with, because it was more difficult than the pain that I experienced trying to purchase weed illegally on the streets. And New Jersey is probably similar, but all of a sudden, if you change that access and you make it easier for these folks, I think all of a sudden you'd see these programs, even in the medical side, be much more robust than what they are. So you got to have qualifying conditions. You got to have flower. You got to have, you got to make it as easy as possible for these folks, because in areas where access on the street is easy, they're not going to do that barrier of entry to come into a legal program. Would you disagree?
No, I don't. I think those are all good points. And I think if I can add one more, I think, and I might get a little bit of scrutiny for this one, but I think that you need to have the right operators when you go through this process. Like, I really think you need these people that say, oh, you can't have these large companies come in and do these things. It doesn't work. They take the jobs and blah, blah, blah. That's like the opposite of how to get programs successfully off the ground. I mean, these are really, really difficult industry to be in. And you need guys who can handle it, who have the capital, who can handle the delays, and everything that comes with it. So the stronger, your players are in the industry, growers, processors, dispensaries, just, from the people that the state's hired to regulate it. Like, I think Maryland's did a great job. Like, you just have to make sure that you have the right people in the right places.
Right. And I think that's a great point. So it starts with the states in terms of who's running their seed-to-sale system. Is it metric? who had struggles in Maryland, but is proven to be pretty successful in other states. And knock on wood, I think we're almost like 6 months. Are we longer than that now?
No, I think 6 to 8 months
with zero metric issues. December, like November, I think October, November is when things started getting fixed, because I remember going to a meeting in December and they said they were going to open up the ability for the point of sales to
the fast track.
I'm rolling my eyes going, oh, they ruined it again. But they've been good.
It worked.
Maryland shit the bed with Resi in terms of the application process. The original reviewers of the application, that contract was not solidified in the nature to set expectations of how many applications Resi would be receiving, or really the time that Resi would be able to process those applications. So when we've seen, we've seen the fruits of when Maryland picks a great operator or Maryland picks like a poor operator, and then it's up to us as well in terms of being operators. Like when we see these states open programs, immediately there's this like not in my backyard of wanting experience and out-of-state operators to come in, even though they bring you a ton of sustainability, and a ton of immediate stability, because their learning curves are decreased and they're able to get up and going. As a small independent, I certainly understand the fear of that, but I think it's important that operators work cohesively in whatever program they are, because when they go after each other, they start cannibalizing each other. We see the effects, and we see what happens when they're in poorly regulated markets. It becomes unsustainable, and the black market prevails, which kind of leads us right into Maryland and where Maryland is in all this, and like what may happen. So I think it's important to understand the landscape right now of what Maryland's program is and the legitimacy of it. So we advocate incredibly hard to treat our dispensary with a clinical designation, and really try to view this as a medical dispensary. And I would argue that we stand oftentimes alone, or in a pack of a few.
What of a few?
Of a few. When it's easier and sometimes more advantageous to get the quick thrills and cheap thrills of just leaning on the subculture of marijuana and the stigmas. And even though you're
playing into the stereotypes that people...
even though you're doing this under the badge of, hey, I'm knocking down stereotypes, you're actually fueling stigmas and preconceived notions, and we're not really necessarily moving the cannabis away from this countercultural rare thing into this mainstream normal medication / substance, right? So in a place like Maryland, what I would assume that would happen is if we saw legalization come in to play, we would see a division of sex, S-E-C-T, sex, where a few of us would still be very focused on the medical side of this and continuing to serve patients. And I think a lot of the majority of folks that I alluded to that really don't have a medical mindset are almost going to take this as a breath of fresh air of, I can finally relax and stop trying to put up this medical front, take down all this medical stuff, put up my Cheech and Chong posters, put up my Grateful Dead, and really plead into all of the Bob Marley and countercultural and stigmas of a recreational program, and likely leave patients seeking sound medical advice behind. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Our circumstances changed significantly over the last 60 days when Maryland passed a law from 1 dispensary to 4 dispensaries. So this session we saw a couple of things happen, but we saw the 1 to 4, and then we saw the working group become initiated for exploring recreational cannabis in Maryland. There's groundlings that education is going to fall into some shortage of dollars, and that cannabis might be seen as the boon to fill some of those dollars. But we saw a lot of shift in terms of what our future looks like as a dispensary operator in Salisbury, Maryland, and the fact that there could be more multi-state operators, and likely legalization of marijuana at a national or recreational or national or local level is something that would likely be seen within 3 to 5 years. And I don't think that I'm saying anything groundbreaking in saying that, and it may not happen for sure, but I think you'd be naive as a business owner in our position to not look at the future. So when I think about this new dichotomy of a legalized program in Maryland, I think of a couple of things. We'll try to talk about different aspects of it. Maybe we'll start with economics, right? I think it's a huge, huge economic opportunity for the state of Maryland. I think when Maryland watched Delaware kick their ass in casinos and watched West Virginia steal people, I mean, people were driving from Baltimore to Charleston, West Virginia at a rate that they had never gone to West Virginia before when they legalized the gambling. And I think that with, as we mentioned, Delaware having a horrible program, Virginia likely off to a rocky start, Maryland with a well-regulated legalized program would be the southernmost state. D.C. is dysfunctional as well, would be the southernmost state with a legit program. Pulling from, when you look at where we sit on the peninsula, I mean, we would be pulling from Virginia, we would be pulling from Delaware, we would be pulling these out-of-state dollars in and injecting them right into our local economy, which is like the end goal of any economic development director in any county, in any state, anywhere. So, and Maryland has shown an appetite for enjoying cannabis, and I just think that with the Kerwin administration, as we mentioned in the very first podcast, coming up with this deficit and the ability to tax adult consumption cannabis at a 20 to 30% tax rate, the economics of this make a lot of sense. Yeah,
and I mean, if you just think of it, I mean, we're privileged enough to live here. I mean, just if I'm in the state of Maryland and I look at the state that's the wealthiest in the country, right? Property values are consistently among the highest anywhere because of DC and Baltimore and a lot of these suburbs. And like Darby alluded to, the excuse me, tourism is huge in the state of Maryland. We have the mountains, we have the Eastern Shore, and we also have a ton of policymakers in Maryland. And Maryland's medical program is kind of looked at as the gold star of the medical program. So I think that if Maryland can do the recreational thing right, it really paves the way to, greater federal decriminalization or kind of allowing its use. And I think the state's definitely going to look at it. They formed a working group this year. It's probably going to be a ballot initiative in 2020. And I mean, we see rates in the state. I mean, 65% of the voters in Maryland agree that it should be recreational. I think the stigmas are kind of fading away. And also because I think Maryland's done a great job in the medical program. I mean, people look at that medical program and say, okay, well, here's a proxy. Not exactly, but here's a proxy for how rec's going to look. And they've done a good job regulating it. Sales are good. The companies are flourishing. There's been no real, kind of bad black eyes on the program. Aha moments.
Where some pragmatist was like, aha, I told you this was going to happen. Like, we haven't had that in Maryland.
And the more we continue to go down that route, the more recreational not only becomes probable, but I think it's likely. I mean, it's going to happen. I think Maryland's going to be the first state, like Darby said, south and east, that's going to legalize it, and it's going to be looked at as a proxy.
When you look at a map, the states so basically the Northeast is mostly has medical programs of some nature coming down to Maryland. Now Virginia just added a medical program, and then it sneaks west a little bit. Ohio's got a medical program.
Illinois, Missouri.
West Virginia's got a new one, right? Yep. That southeast is gray, and every map uses green because it's all weed, right? So every map you look at, it's all like light green and dark green, and the west coast and the east coast, northeast, and then like a little matching coming in the middle with Colorado, and then the southeast is just always gray.
So I'm looking at the map now. So from the state of Virginia all the way through the Appalachians, all the way down to Mississippi, including Tennessee, Kentucky, and Indiana, the entire swath of the country, there's not a single medical or recreational program right now.
And we didn't even talk about this, but now's a great time. Like, we talk about how regulated states are with marijuana. I looked at a map and saw like CBD laws. Like, good golly, I mean, we saw the lady get harassed at Disney World last week for having CBD oil on her and ended up taking her to jail. And, like, you know, it was still mind-boggling to me that when you look in those southern states, a lot of them still have fairly, like, none of them, most of them are not completely restrictive, but a lot of them, I was amazed at the language and the verbiage that's still in place around something like CBD that's non-intoxicating, that's really been proven at this point to be far more beneficial than it was thought of, and certainly far less harmful. You know, any types of harmful side effects. It's not addictive. There's not really anything negative that can happen with CBD other than if you stop taking it, whatever it was helping is not going to be helped any longer. So you know, I think when we get bullish and excited, we realize that southern swath is not going to stay like that forever.
I mean, you have states in there like North Carolina, which, you know, has a ton of younger people moving into the state.
Right? It's a beautiful place. It's very progressive. You're seeing more and more places like that pop up in that area.
South Carolina,
Greenville,
Georgia,
Spartanburg.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, these states are going to eventually, I mean, they don't live in a bubble. That's for sure. And I can assure you that there are people in those states who are cannabis users.
And there's people in those states that are sitting there that were at one point mining something, or at one point we're looking at fossil fuels, or we're looking at these different areas of industry and saying, well, that's gone by the wayside now. And we have this 70,000 square foot building that no one's been in for 10 years. And we could put a cultivator in here and within a year turn a $20 million business, employ 50 people. It's and then there's the opioid epidemic, right? There's this dichotomy now of opioid epidemic is widespread through every single community in the United States, and more dollars and more cents are needed to combat this. And cannabis is showing in medical states of a 25% reduction in some ways. We're seeing it every day in our dispensary. So there's this thing that cannabis could be a beacon and a tool to combat this opioid epidemic. And, oh, by the way, a significant generation of tax dollars in this, you know, I don't care which state you're in, everyone's looking for budget. I mean, everyone's got budget concerns, and everyone's trying to cut the pie into another slice. And they're always looking for new ways to generate revenue. And, like, there's only, you know, when you look at how governments generate revenue, taxing is the least politically advantageous, right? Like, no one wants to be the politician that runs around saying taxes are going up, right? So taxing income and
sales,
being able to generate economic development to create a larger tax base is a much more strategic way for these folks to be able to generate tax dollars than just raising the rates on their current base. So I think, you know, that the South will see the spur of cannabis, but they're going to lag behind. I think, you know, Maryland's in the sweet spot. I think, and Maryland's still a year and a half behind. But I think for the economics of it, it makes a lot of sense. I think from a patient perspective, what you'll see is there'll be a few of us that will keep our medical model and still go after and cater to the patient base. And I think the patient base will continue to grow as cannabinoid-based wellness and cannabinoid-based medicine becomes more and more popular. But one of the things that you do run into with an overly robust medical program is these operators that are able to kind of run under a rec-style culture. And that hurts traditional patients, right? Like if I'm a 60-year-old woman with Lyme disease, which is kind of this, when we created our dispensary, we created this fictitious patient, at least I did in my head, and she was a 60-year-old woman with Lyme disease, and she's never used cannabis before a day in her life, and she's at her wit's end, and she wants to be able to see if cannabis is going to help her. I want her to feel comfortable from start to finish in my dispensary, whether it's from our website, whether it's from when she walks through the door, patient consultant, the entire experience should be something that you shouldn't have to be a cannabis enthusiast to get through our dispensary. And I think that if maybe you take the burden of trying to have a medical front off of some of these guys and they can go right and just participate in the adult use and rec markets, you might actually see some progress being made with research, with patient outcomes, because the folks that are still doing medicine are are still focused around actually that piece of it, and the folks that just really wanted to run a rec store are able to go out and do that piece as well. So I think there's a piece of that could be beneficial to patients as well.
Yeah, and I think I'll add that I think there's going to be this middle ground of the wellness piece. I think you're going to see a lot of people who, they might be older, they might be younger, who knows, that have either tried it once and just don't want to do it because it's illegal, and then all of a sudden they want to go in the store, but at the same time they want to know what they're doing. Like, they want to go in there and say, oh, I'm going on a hike with my friends next Tuesday, and sometimes I get a little sore, and I just want to make sure I have a great time. And you'd be able to give them and consult with them and tell them about how a specific product's going to make them feel better on their hike.
I don't want to feel anxious about work or leaving the kids behind. I want something that's going to allow me to be in the moment and enjoy my hike.
And I think you're going to find that wellness piece is going to be that mesh of, there's people that are definitely going to stay on the medical track, like Darby said, just because they need it. Right,
we're betting on the wellness piece.
Yeah, and the chances are, like, there's going to be THC restrictions on this stuff, and then for the rec side, you're going to have the people that want to come in and say, I want to do slab dabs all day. Give me your cheapest concentrate because I want to put it on YouTube and show you how cool I am. But that's fine. That's what they want to do. That's the market, right?
Right.
And then there's going to be that. I just think that wellness piece. Yeah, and then that wellness piece, and then people are going to start to get more into it, and just because it has so many different effects depending on what you're looking for and how you consume it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wellness piece, you're right. Like, there's folks that are using it like as a specific medicine to combat a specific diagnosis, and then there's folks that are using it more as a wellness tool. There's not necessarily a specific protocol. It's more of an as needed basis, and for sure that market is going to grow tremendously. Like, when I think about adult use, like, I think about how many people are going to stop taking ibuprofen. Like, seriously, I mean, not so much like today, but in 10 or 15 years, with the research that we have about how bad something like ibuprofen can be on your liver and kidneys, and how much research we have about how cannabis could be a much better daily option for someone that says, I take 2 Aleve every day for my back. I wouldn't be surprised if they're taking 2 3-to-1 troches that are part CBD, part THC, but they're not taking it every day. They cut wood today, so their back's flared up, and they're going to that route. The idea is that there's some folks that need to stop a seizure, and they have a very specific regimen of how they're going to be using that medication. There's other folks that, like myself, I've always tried to put myself in the wellness book. I think you do too.
Yep.
And I think that market's going to grow. And to Chuck's point, they're not all of the adult use or adult access dispensaries are going to fall in the slab dab. Let's get as high as we possibly can. Great, now everybody can get fucked up. Like, I don't there's going to be a market for that, but that's not the majority of the market, and that's not certainly the path that we'll go down to cater to. So that's what I think. I think Maryland is set up economically to be in a really good position if legalization comes, because of all the groundwork they did with their medical program. I think it would be more restrictive, similar to the lines of a Massachusetts or an Arizona, not so much like a Nevada or Alaska. And I think that folks should be looking at how we can utilize tax dollars based on their reward our community. And education is something that is obviously something that's near and dear to my heart, and I believe a great place for it to go.
I think I'll give my bold prediction is that rec comes to Maryland. It gets on the ballot next year in 2020, and it passes by.
Ooh, let's pick a number. I'm gonna go 71%.
Passing rate?
Yeah, I know it's aggressive, but
that is an aggressive number. I don't think I can be that aggressive. I'll go 63%.
That would still be.
That's a landslide, right? And then also, I think Maryland's medical program drug on for 2.5 years, 3 years before it actually came to fruition. From the time the applications were filled out, I think that the recreational market, because of the taxes, and because of the established medical market, is going to come to fruition and come to market way quicker. I bet it happens within 18 months of that legislation passing.
And you're already going to have operators in place that they can give that ability to. So we saw with David Moon's bill was that if you currently had a medical program license, then you were going to be grandfathered into a rec license. I guess, without backtracking too much, we see different models for that in states that have both. So in some states, you see completely separate buildings and completely separate businesses. One's a rec and one's medical. In some places like Colorado, the building's almost like cut in half. If you're a state resident, you show your state resident ID, and then you can go into the adult use or the medical side. And then if you were a non-resident and don't have a medical card, then you would go to the other side. The other side's going to have high taxes, lower THC content, lower product selection. The medical side's going to have low taxes or no taxes. Normally a larger variety of products and normally higher THC contents. So, podcast number 3, that is cannabis at a national level, kind of a state-by-state look at different programs and how they are juxtaposed next to each other. Couple things on our agenda. Our next, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 podcasts, you'll see us have our first guest on. I know that'll be really entertaining for you guys to be able to see us interact with other folks and not just talking back and forth to each other. So that's something we're looking forward to. And then also just continuing to increase the amount of shows that we do. Trying to get to that 1 a week is challenging, but we're continuing to work to that. So like, comment, share with your friends. Anthony, Darby signing out. Chuck?
Nope, I think that's good. Thanks for watching and listening. I hope to see you back next week.